So with AI becoming infinitely better at computational analysis and set to take over a lot of the kind of basic administrative and knowledge work over the coming years, where do humans fit in? I think that's the main question, is where are humans going to be in this new world? And humans still have the edge over AI in the form of the emergent phenomenon we refer to as consciousness.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
As a team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch.
This is where we hold them. This is where we fight. This is where they die. And these shields die.
Hello, beautiful people. This is episode 9 of the Matt's Mindset podcast. Today we are discussing the need to cultivate lifelong learning and autodidacticism in the face of artificial intelligence. Autodidacticism just means like self-learning or self-taught. It's going to be extreme importance in the coming years because AI is going to shape the world in amazing ways. It's also going to be a massive disruptor on a scale that we haven't seen since really the introduction of the internet. And in the years to come, people will be discussing the introduction of the printing press, the disruption of the steam engine, the explosion of the internet, and the changes that came about due to AI all in the same breath. This is the real deal. This is not crypto or VR. This is going to be the next big thing. And AI is going to change the landscape of how we work and who we work with, and jobs will be phased out and jobs will be created, and programmers with only a college education will be able to code on par with coders who've been doing it for 30 years. It's going to be an incredibly equalizing tool. Lawyers will be able to find and cite case law with much greater ease given AI's capacity to digest large corpuses of text and respond to queries as easily as if you were texting your friend. This is a Malthusian moment, and what I mean by that is Thomas Malthus was a British economist living in the late 1700s who predicted that the natural population growth of the British Empire at that time would inevitably outpace agricultural export, ultimately resulting in famine and other catastrophes that he postulated until the population was reduced back to a sustainable level. He actually forecasted this using models and statistics and based on the information that he had, and was actually correct based on the information available that the population, which was exploding at this time, especially due to large families, like Ireland especially was very Catholic, and so big families, obviously lots of people not necessarily in poverty, but not necessarily like affluent either, like working class or poor, working poor, were having a lot of children. And Malthus, who was kind of a bit of a misanthrope anyway, but was talking about how there's no way that we can support all these people in the British Empire and throughout the world. There's just way too many people. And the thing is, though, while he was correct with all of his statistics and mathematics and everything in his theory, what he never could have predicted or accounted for was the Industrial Revolution. And that's actually kind of a problem with modeling and forecasting anyway. We saw it in the COVID models, where you can try to put in all the inputs and you can try to model something, but you can't model for every eventuality. You can't model for black swan events. You can't even model for the irrationality of human behavior. And So all of his models were based on the then available output of agricultural inputs. But at the population of the British Empire, which was exploding, he didn't see any way for that to continue. So he thought that with more demand and steady supply, he predicted massive inflation would ensue. But technologies at that time, shortly after him, around the same time and shortly after him, but technologies like the spinning jenny and the water wheel, the steam engine, electricity, and eventually the telegraph, telephone, and then the internal combustion engine all increased productivity on a scale hitherto unbefore seen in history. And so when you have an increase in production, when one worker can suddenly become 5 times more productive than previously before, this is massively deflationary. This deflationary factor on the economy and supply can then catch up and even exceed the previous demand that Malthus had modeled. And so we are living through another Malthusian moment where AI has the ability to make any one individual involved in knowledge work 5 times more productive than they would have been without it. And as we mainly live in a post-industrial society in the United States and in much of Europe, and most of our exports are intellectual property or our software or are things that revolve around knowledge work, then vast swaths of our population are about to become X amount of times more productive, and it will be good because it will be massively deflationary at a time where we're having rampant inflation. And so I won't go into too much detail about the capabilities of AI, artificial intelligence, or chatbots here, because there are experts who can just do it much better than I can. But I'll direct you to episodes 118, 122, and 124 of the All In podcast, as well as episode 367 of the Lex Friedman podcast, which he's interviewing Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. But suffice to say, AI is iterating on a track almost unforeseen in technological advancement before. To give you a frame of reference, the iPhone takes about a year and took about a year for each iteration of the iPhone. And even in the early days, it was iterating more radically, but even now, each iteration of the iPhone's the camera's slightly better or something, but it takes about a year for the next iteration of the iPhone to come out. It takes about a month at this pace for the next iteration of AI to come out. At first, it was just ChatGPT, which was a question and answer machine. Then it could write blogs or short articles for you, proofread your work. And then being in ChatGPT 4, which is the paid version, it could incorporate plugins. So OpenTable or Kayak. So you could tell GPT-4 would you could basically just tell it to find a restaurant in this price range for this cuisine, find a table for 4 on this date, find a hotel that is walking distance from that restaurant and is in this price range and sleeps this many people and has this many amenities. So you could give it all these parameters, and using the applications and plugins from these other apps, it could then find everything for you and say, this is what I've found, this is what I've planned for you, would you like me to just execute this? And then you could tell it, no, I want this, I want that, and you could revise it. And so now we've basically arrived as of the date of this recording, and I'm sure this will be completely outdated by the time you listen to this, but with AI agents, which are basically fully actualized virtual assistants. You can ask an AI agent just to do a task instead of prompting it one at a time. Instead of prompting it kind of like a question answer machine, you can give it parameters and then ask it to execute a task, which may involve several steps or places it needs to go on the web. So it's almost like programming, but on a graphic interface. It's it would be like you programming an AI with if-then statements, if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that. But rather than needing to learn how to code or learning how to do the language or forgetting to put a apostrophe where it needs to be and the code doesn't run correctly, the code is already programmed for you, and you just have to, in plain language, tell it what you want, and it will then execute the steps for you. So with AI becoming infinitely better at computational analysis and set to take over a lot of the kind of basic administrative and knowledge work over the coming years, where do humans fit in? I think that's the main question, is where are humans going to be in this new world? And humans still have the edge over AI in the form of the emergent phenomenon we refer to as consciousness, which we discussed in depth in my Nature of God episode. So I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds here. But suffice to say, it's going to be a long time before AI can think and perform creative tasks and engage in true critical thinking. Yes, AI can, just to steelman that argument, yes, AI can generate a painting from a word that you give it, or write a haiku in the style of Kurt Vonnegut if you ask it to, which is actually pretty cool. You can literally ask it to write like something creative, or even like a blog post or whatever, in the style of someone else, in the style of Marcel Proust, or in the style of Kurt Vonnegut, or in the style of James Joyce. You can ask it to do something in that style because it's read all of their work and can kind of mimic their voice. But that's the point. That's just it. All it can do is imitate. It cannot create its own voice. As Rick Rubin would say, one of the most important producers of the last 20 years, music producer, while some of these works are impressive, like these artistic works, he said, I have yet to have an emotional experience while looking at them. And that really resonated with me, because I entirely agree with him, where some of these works and paintings are really impressive and cool, that's the thing. While they are cool, they lack emotional depth. They are it's a great story, and a great painting can literally move someone to tears, that can give someone an emotional experience. And I have yet to see anything that AI has created that gives me any sort of emotional experience beyond, wow, that's pretty cool. If you've, and this feeling, if you've ever seen a Van Gogh painting, what I'm talking about, or I don't know, some famous artist, but Van Gogh is the one that really resonates for me, because I remember standing in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and there was a room I was walking through, and there's a little sign that says, this room that you're about to walk into contains a Van Gogh. And I was like, oh, that's sick. And I remember thinking, I wonder which one it is. I'm going to be walking, I wonder which one it's going to be. And as soon as I stepped into the room, I was like, oh, it's that one. It was so evocative. It was so different from anything else in that room and anything else I'd ever seen. And it was just it immediately gives you an emotion. It feels emotionally charged. And so creativity and critical thinking, as well as the creation of new knowledge, will still be the realm solely occupied by humans for quite a while. And the reason for this is because there's a big difference between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, or AGI. In his conversation with Tim Ferriss and Naval Ravikant, David Deutsch, the professor of physics from Oxford University, discusses this at length, and I'm going to let him explain it in a much better way than I ever could. So pause.
Related to that, we've touched upon AGI here and there. You have said AGI is absolutely possible, and that Turing settled that issue. Some people are saying it's almost inevitable, and we have to worry about things like AGI alignment. I'm wondering if you have thoughts on both. Is self-improving runaway AGI here? And is this something that we need to align with our beliefs, whatever those are? In fact, I don't think we as humans can even agree upon alignment, but suppose we could. How would we align an AGI?
Yeah, and we don't even any longer try to align humans in the way that people want to align AGIs, namely by physically crippling their thinking. Yes, I don't think we're anywhere near it yet. I'd love to be wrong about that, but I don't think we're anywhere near it. And I think that AI, although it's a wonderful technology, and I think it's going to go a lot further than it is now, AI has nothing to do with AGI. It's a completely different technology, and it is in many ways the opposite of AGI. And the way I always explain this is that with an AGI, or a person, an artificial person, their thinking is unpredictable. We're expecting them to produce ideas that nobody predicted they would produce, and which are good explanations. That's what people can do. And I don't mean necessarily write physics papers or whatever. We do this thing in our everyday lives all the time. You can't live an ordinary human life without creating new good explanations. An AGI would be needed to build a robot that can live in the world as a human. That's Turing's idea with what is mistakenly called the Turing test. Now, why an AI is the opposite to an AGI is that an AGI, as I said, can do anything, whereas an AI can only do the narrow thing that it's supposed to do. Like a better chatbot is one that replies in good English, replies to the question you ask, can look things up for you, doesn't say anything politically incorrect. The better the AGI is, the more constrained its output is. You may not be able to, say what the result of all your constraints must be. It's not constrained in the sense that you prescribe what it is going to say, but you prescribe the rule that what it is going to say must follow, or the rules. So, if it's a chess playing program, then the idea is you must win the game. And making a better one of these means amputating more of the possibilities of what it would otherwise do, like namely lose, or in the case of chatbots, say the wrong thing, or not answer your question, or contradict itself, or whatever. So the art of making a good AI is to limit its possibilities tremendously. You limit them a trillionfold compared with what it could be. There are a trillion ways of being wrong for every way of being right. The same is true of chess playing programs. Whereas the perfect AGI, as it were, would be where you can show by looking at the program and can show mathematically that there is no output that it couldn't produce, including no output at all. So an AGI, like a person, might refuse to answer. It should have that right, by the First Amendment. So you can't have a behavioral test for an AGI because the AGI may not cooperate. It may be right not to cooperate because it may be very right to suspect what you're going to do to it. Do you see that this is not only a different kind of program, it's going to require a different kind of programming because there is no such thing as a specification. We know sort of philosophically what we want the AGI to be, a bit like, parents know philosophically that they want their children to be happy, but they don't want, if they're doing the right thing, they don't want to say, well, my child will never say X, will never utter these words like you do for an AI. You will recognize what it means to be happy once they've done it.
I think fundamental to your worldview and explanation of what humans are is humans create knowledge through creativity. And what you're basically saying is that an AI, the narrow AI, is not allowed to be creative. It has to solve a specific problem. And true creativity means you can hold any idea in your head. It's unbounded. And so it can display any behavior pattern. And until you see that this thing has complete ability to be creative and therefore output any behavior pattern, you haven't created an AGI. You've just created a narrow, constrained automaton.
Exactly.
So that was David Deutsch and Naval Ravikant speaking about AGI on the Tim Ferriss show. And so I would actually recommend you listen to the whole podcast episode. It's phenomenal, but that is the short little clip where they talk explicitly about AGI. And so as they discussed, creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking, as well as the ability to think about new and different ideas, novel ideas, will still solely rest with humanity for the foreseeable future, which is why it's incredibly important now more than ever to cultivate that sense of lifelong learning in your life and invest in your own self-development and your own education. I was going to do a whole episode, frankly, about why we need to reform the educational system, but at least in this country, in the United States. But to be honest, it would be way too complex, and I'm not connected enough, and I'm not, frankly, knowledgeable enough to understand all the nuance. And I would kind of just be yelling into the void about how we need to switch to a more constructivist style of education, but it wouldn't really be the purpose of this podcast. It wouldn't be helping you become the best version that you would be. It would just kind of be me screaming about how broken our educational system would be. So rather than do that, I will just put the onus on you and put the onus on me to be responsible for our own education, because to that end, I can provide a quick history lesson as to why the system is set up the way it is, because it wasn't always broken. It was set up in a very specific way, and it's just become ineffectual to our society at this moment in time. The roots of the U.S. educational system can be traced back to the early 17th century, so the early 1600s, and when the first public schools were established in Massachusetts. These schools were designed to provide basic literacy and numeracy skills to the general population, with a particular focus on religious instruction. So as John Locke came up with the idea of the tabula rasa, the blank slate, that we should be teaching everybody, not just the landed gentry, not just the people at the top of the social hierarchy. So basically these schoolhouses were set up to just promote basic literacy and numeracy skills, and obviously in Puritan Massachusetts to promote religious instruction. And over time, the U.S. educational system evolved to be more formalized and centralized. So rather than just certain cities and towns and Puritan communities, it was formalized and centralized as the central government became more formalized and centralized, to have an increasing emphasis on standardization and efficiency. So in the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, the educational system was heavily influenced by the Industrial Revolution, as we just discussed, and the growing need for skilled workers in factories and other industries. And so as the production line, as a lot of these things were being innovated, it was all based around standardization and efficiency. So like the Model T, if you're working on the Model T in a Ford factory, you had one job, and it could be you specialized. It could be, putting the headlights on a Model T. It could be turning this one screw or whatever. It was all about, the production line was all about standardization and efficiency. Everything was the same size. Everything was put into the same thing. You were one person who did one thing. And as a result, the educational system was designed to prepare students for the demands of the industrial workforce, with an emphasis on standardized testing, teacher-centered instruction, and rote learning. So factory work, as we discussed, and worked on one task. You did one thing on a production line, you got really good at it, and it's designed, so the educational system as such was designed with conformity in mind. You had one job and one job only. You had to learn this and repeat it back. Do it well, and you'll be rewarded. And today, the educational system is still heavily influenced. It really hasn't gone through too much reform. It's still very heavily influenced by these historical roots, with an emphasis on standardized testing, accountability, and efficiency. However, there is a growing recognition among educators, policymakers, and other stakeholders that the current educational system is just not really well suited to meet the needs of today's learners. It's not a new issue. We've known about these issues in our educational system probably since the mid 20th century, dating all the way back to the days of Jean Piaget, John Dewey, like the Dewey Decimal System, Seymour Papert. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. In fact, one of the main platforms that George W. Bush ran on was educational reform in the 2000s and early 2000s. He was going to be the educational reform president. He was sitting in a second grade classroom reading them a story when the planes hit on 9/11. And of course, we got sidetracked at that point into a quagmire, into a war on terror. It was a classic guns and butter conundrum. And more on that, guns and butter and all that stuff, you can go back to my America series. But it's only now we're especially feeling the fallout of our inaction, because based on research conducted by Pew Research Center in 2017, we, the United States, are now 24th in science, 40th in the world at math, and 24th in the world in literacy. So we are not leading the world by any stretch of the imagination on average in any division of knowledge, in any division of education. Singapore actually leads the world in all three categories, which I suppose makes sense, but the public educational system is set up to prepare you for a 9-to-5 corporate job, basically, as it was set up to prepare you for life on a production line. It was set up so you would conform to an authority figure, so that you would show up at a factory every day from between when the whistle blew and when the whistle blew at the end of the day, and you would do the same thing all day, every day, and at the end of your 30 years, you get a gold watch and you get a pension. And that was basically how it was set up. And obviously you could, rise above and do something else or whatever the case may be, but that's what the educational system was set up to do, and that's what it still continues to function as today. It tests your ability to conform and regurgitate information to an authority figure who deems it important, regardless of whether you retain such information for the long term. It does not take into account your unique learning style, nor does it allow you to focus on what you're intrinsically interested in, while allowing you to have only the basic understanding of the subjects that you struggle with. So basically, it's like we as a society agree that everyone should have these basic subjects. But I think something that I take issue with is if you're not good in a particular subject, I don't think you should be forced to just continue to try to learn that particular subject. If it's clear that you excel in one area and it's clear that you are struggling in one area, you should obviously have the basic tools that you need. Like everyone should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, for example. But I don't think everyone needs to learn calculus or geometry. If you need to learn calculus and geometry in the future, you can go on YouTube and figure it out because you're trying to create a front stoop or something. But odds are most people are not going to use calculus and geometry in their life unless that's something they're really good at, and then they should double down and get really good at that and focus on that. But I think that rather than just trying to continue to force everybody to learn the same thing, people need to, ideally the school system should be having people who excel in particular subjects, put them in an advanced class with other people who excel in that particular subject and allow them to excel. And the people who perhaps don't excel in school, allow them to have shop classes and allow them to do things outside or allow them to explore their own intrinsic motivations. Because as Albert Einstein says, everybody is a genius, but if you test a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its entire life thinking it was stupid. A fish is adapted for a very specific environment. A monkey is adapted for a very specific environment, and both thrive in their own respective environments. But neither would thrive both would die in the other's environment. So we have to know that everyone learns in a different way. Everyone's interested in different things. Everyone's specialized for different things. And whatever you're specialized in, you need to lean into that. And since the educational system is not going to do it for you, you have to do it for yourself. So what can you do is, first things first, you need to discover your own learning style. The main 4 learning styles are auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and reading and writing learners. So auditory learners learn best when information is presented to them via strategies that involve talking, such as lectures or group discussions. They benefit from repeating back the lessons or having recordings of the lecture or group activities that require classmates explaining ideas, etc. This is my learning style. I love listening to podcasts. I enjoy lectures in school. In college, I would take notes on the specifics of what I found important or interesting. I'd ask questions or engage in dialogue to think through my own conclusions. Today, like I said, I learn best by listening to podcasts or audiobooks while engaging in a secondary activity. So I'll listen to a podcast while I'm doing a chore, such as cleaning the house or cooking food or walking or playing a game like Civilization 6. I'm performing a task that I can put on autopilot, like I'm kind of putting the rest of my body on autopilot while I'm listening to this podcast or this audiobook. And when I come across something interesting, especially if I'm listening to it on AirPods, I can just say to the AirPods, "Hey Siri, make a note," and then I can repeat back what I just heard. And that's definitely how I learn. And it's one of the reasons why I like podcasting, because I learn something, I think about it, I kind of synthesize it, I create a script, and then I am repeating back what I've learned. And if you can explain something, you truly understand it. If you can explain a concept without having to lean on words that someone would have to know to understand what you're talking about, like if you can explain in layman's terms what concept, then you fully understand it. And that's how I learn. Kinesthetic learners, by contrast, are individuals who learn by doing. Like they enjoy a hands-on experience. Like they're more in touch with reality and more connected to it. They're more concrete, which is why they require a tactile experience to understand something better. This could be architects, interior designers. This could be engineers, mechanics, someone in the trades, builders, general contractors, anyone who wants to build and touch and get their hands on how things fit together. Like they need to draw it out. They need to have blocks. They need to map it out. They need to, like, whatever they need to, like, it's visual, but it's also tertiary. Like it's kind of a mix of like visual learners, but it's also a mix of like literally creating the thing, like drawing the thing, touching the thing. And then of course, reading and writers, which I'm kind of this a little bit, but they learn best by writing down ideas or reading ideas. They learn best by reading ideas and arguments and then rewriting the arguments to make sure that they understand them. And I'm a little bit this way, but I certainly learn better through auditory than by reading. There's also 4 categories of sublearning. So I'll link this article in the show notes, which you can find on my blog, but there's 4 categories of sublearning for each individual, such as whether they learn better in groups or as individuals. Someone who learns much better as an individual involved in kind of solitary study, or I can chew on an idea for a while and think about it. And then I like to come back to a group discussion and talk about my opinions and whether like how it compares and contrasts with what other people thought, rather than kind of talking immediately in a group setting with you read something, you listen to something, and then immediately you engage in like a dialectic discourse. So to the point of that is everyone learns in an extremely unique way. So that's your first order of business, is to figure out what your learning style is, what your own unique learning style is. You probably already know, you probably already gravitate this anyway, but you need to become consciously aware of it. And then next you have to cultivate your own personal curiosity. Like, what are you intrinsically motivated to learn? And what I mean by that is intrinsic motivation involves doing something that's personally rewarding to you in particular. Extrinsic motivation involves doing something that because you want to earn a reward or you want to avoid punishment. So intrinsic motivation is tied to what I would call the wealth game, or Naval Ravikant would call the wealth game, which I talk about pretty much in depth in my Lean Into Yourself episode. And what is rewarding to you personally in your own life is intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is based around the status game. It's what looks prestigious to others and to society. And so that's the status game. Same, talk about both of these games, the games of life, in my Lean Into Yourself podcast. But with the advent of artificial intelligence, many of the careers that we see as extremely prestigious will start to be massively disrupted. It doesn't seem very far off that AI will be able to diagnose diseases better than any qualified physician, or perform surgery with a 0 error rate, or compile case law and create an argument that is tailored to a specific case, using every legal argument or case ever codified into text. Doctors and lawyers will not be phased out, like it's not going to replace them, nor that it would be terrifying if they were replaced, but their part in the process will be much more spot checking artificial intelligence to make sure that there hasn't been an error. And so humans will always play a part, but the prestigious professions where we as a society that we revere these professions, but we also allow for a certain error rate, such as in surgery, there's always going to be a certain margin of error that we have to accept. In flying, in commercial flying, there's always a certain margin of error that we accept. In law, I suppose, is like you going into a lawsuit, you can have a pretty airtight case, but there's always a certain margin of error that we can accept. And these professions, which are massively prestigious, will be disrupted by an AI that has literally promises a 0 error rate. You yourself needs to forget really what society deems as prestigious at this moment in time and really focus on what you're intrinsically motivated to do, what you're intrinsically curious about, what you're intrinsically motivated to study. Naval Ravikant, who I frequently talk about on this channel, has a bit of advice about how you should read what you're interested in until you become interested in reading. That could even mean comic books or fan fiction. It could be whatever you want. Read whatever you want until you enjoy reading. In a similar way, Brene Brown, who we discussed at length last week, has a saying that curiosity is a skill of midlife. Meaning that once your brain has been fully developed around the age of 26, once your frontal lobe has fully developed, you are no longer an adolescent. You're an adult, like biologically. You may be an adult at 18 legally, but you're an adult biologically at 26. So at that point, curiosity will become your greatest asset. So from getting curious as to why you behave a certain way when confronted with certain triggers, or to why you're curious about a certain topic, curiosity is going to become your superpower. And this mindset can help you in every facet of your life. Phil Stutz, the psychiatrist who Jonah Hill did the Netflix documentary about his psychiatrist, Phil Stutz, he talks about your inner critic. He calls it your part X. It's the part of you who tries to stamp on your dreams, who in a really perverse way tries to keep you safe. It's the part of you that isn't, because the brain isn't concerned with your happiness per se, your conscious mind. It's concerned with keeping you safe. That's how evolution evolved that way. Part X is part of you that says, basically part X is concerned with keeping you not banished from the tribe, because when back in the day when our brains first evolved, to be banished from your tribe was basically certain death. So your part X is doing whatever it takes to just maintain the status quo, because if you start to rock the boat, then you might upset people. And if you upset people, then you could be banished from the tribe. And if you're banished from the tribe, your brain thinks you're going to die. So part A, like it's where it doesn't really serve us at this moment in time, because we aren't living in little tribes anymore, and banishment from people, from social judgment, does not mean, it's not a death sentence anymore. In fact, it's necessary in this world. So part X is the part of you that says, I want to start that business, and part X tells you why you can't. It's the part of you that when you say, God, she's pretty, I want to talk to her, it tells you why that's not a good idea. It's the part of you that when you have something to say, when you come to an idea that you want to share with people, it'll say, like, it'll tell you why that would be dangerous to share your opinion, like we said, because you could face social judgment and you could be banished from the tribe. And so cultivating this mindset of curiosity is kind of the opposite and the cure to your part X, which is no longer serving you in this age of modernity. So when you're operating from your curiosity, you're not operating from that place of fear anymore. And so your internal monologue starts to change. It might sound more like, I wonder what a conversation with her would be like. Let's find out. Like, I wonder what type of accent that is. Like, I'm going to ask him. I wonder if I could achieve this business or achieve financial freedom if I just worked hard and put the time in and created a business plan. Like, there's only one way to find out. Like, I'm curious about the outcome. You know, it's not saying it's going to be easy. It's not saying that it's going to work out. It's saying, I'm curious to see how this is going to work out, versus that will never work out, because whatever you tell yourself is more likely to be true. If you tell yourself it's not going to work, then you're right. If you tell yourself, I'm curious as to how this works out, I'm hoping for this outcome, then you're more likely to achieve that outcome. Curiosity allows for you to be you, whoever that is. And in an age of AI, it's going to be twice as important as ever to be who you truly are, because that's going to be how you bring value to society. AI is going to bring it's going to invalidate a lot of hard skills. Like, soft skills are going to be the new currency moving forward. And to be truly, you're going to have to really be truly self-aware of your habits. And as Pema Chodron would call it, your Shenpa. Pema Chodron is a American Tibetan Buddhist, and the Shenpa is a Tibetan word which is usually translated as attachment, which makes sense with Buddhism, but a more descriptive translation might be hooked. So when a Shenpa hooks us, we're likely to get stuck. Like we could call shenpa that sticky feeling. It's an everyday experience. It's a subtle level. We feel a tightening in our chest, a tensing, a sense of closing down. We feel a sense of withdrawing, not wanting to be where we are. That's the hooked quality. Like it's that tight feeling has the power to hook us into self-denigration, blame, anger, jealousy, and other emotions, which lead to words and actions that end up poisoning us. So a shenpa, your shenpa, because all of us have them, my shenpa, thrives on the underlying insecurity in living in a world that's always changing. So we express this insecurity as a background of slight unease or restlessness. We all want some kind of relief from that unease. So we turn to food, alcohol, drugs, sex, work, shopping, things that in moderation we might enjoy, like things that might be extremely delightful. When we empower these things with the idea that they'll bring us comfort, that's when we get hooked. If you're going out of your way to just have random casual sex as a way to cover up your own lack of intimacy, or if you're drinking every night because you think you deserve it, or if you're ordering out every night and splurging on food, like these are all things that you think will provide you comfort from the uneasiness you feel about the rapidly changing environment we find ourselves in, and you can get yourself hooked. You can get yourself addicted. And so we also call shenpa the urge to smoke a cigarette, the urge to overeat, the urge to have another drink, the urge to overindulge. Sometimes the shenpa is so strong we're literally willing to die to get this short-term symptomatic relief. Like having a cigarette is killing you, but it feels good in the moment. And this momentum behind this urge is so strong that we usually never pull out of this habitual pattern of turning to poison for comfort until it doesn't necessarily even have to involve a substance. It could be saying mean things or approaching everything with a critical mind. Basically, something will trigger an old pattern that we'd rather not feel, and we tighten up and hook into criticizing or complaining. It gives us a puffed up satisfaction and a feeling of control that provides short-term relief from uneasiness. So this could be something that you've witnessed with others or something you've witnessed with yourself. Is something triggers us and we project onto others. So rather than something makes us feel powerless, so then we turn around and we bully someone, or we turn around and we make someone else feel small because something made us feel small. And so we don't want to feel that way. So we project it onto someone else, because it's so much easier to project your own feelings onto someone else than it is to actually say, what am I feeling, and to sit with that feeling. So those of us with strong addictions know that working with habitual patterns begin with the willingness to fully acknowledge the urge. Like I said, it's so much easier to project. It's so much harder to just sit with the feeling and not try to medicate it away with, drugs, sex, or rock and roll. And then the willingness not to act on it. So without a meditation practice, this is almost impossible to do. So generally speaking, we don't catch the tightening, because the tightening happens it's a pattern that's ingrained in us. Like a trigger will happen, the tightening will happen, we'll have the urge that can be seemingly overwhelming to scratch the itch in some habitual way, some way that we've developed. It's a coping mechanism. And the key about this is AIs don't have shenpas. AIs don't have subjective experience. They don't feel unease or anxiety. They don't have a need for self-preservation. And this is why, as Yuval Noah Harari, the famous historian, puts in his book Homo Deus, it's going to be twice as important to know and be curious about ourselves, because otherwise we run the risk of becoming what he calls hacked humans, meaning an algorithm knows us better than we know ourselves. So, for example, in the name of productivity and being better able to serve you, a virtual assistant will begin to compile subconsciously a dossier on you. And if you think that that's like dystopian or something, this is already happening. Like you can look up your own dossier on Facebook. I forgot how to do it, but if you just Google it, it will tell you how to, through the Facebook app, find out exactly what little things Facebook has deduced about you. And some of the things you've told Facebook, like when you fill out your profile, like you tell it a lot of information. And so it'll if you go to this page on Facebook, it'll show you how the algorithm has deduced what your political leanings are, how well educated you are, what your relationship status is, what your personality is like based on the types of content you consume. So algorithms are already doing this. And beyond that, an algorithm will be able to compile like a profile based on a view, like based on what songs you listen to. Like, are they happy? Are they sad? Are they aggressive? Are they upbeat? Like what you're in, Spotify already kind of does this in an innocuous way, but like Spotify Wrapped, it tells you what your favorite songs were, how many times you listened to them, which I love Spotify Wrapped. It's like one of my favorite parts of the year. But an algorithm is telling you these are your learning patterns, this is your listening patterns. And what you search and query on the internet or to a chatbot, like how and what you learn, what you fear and what you desire, these things will all, this is data that will all become available, especially to AIs that are able to crawl the entire internet. And for people wearing Apple Watches and things like that, like these algorithms will have access to your own internal biorhythms. Like algorithms will literally be able to tell when you're in a heightened state of fight or flight or a relaxed state of peace, and will be able to deduce from the context what your triggers are. If you're not aware of your own triggers, AI will be able to deduce what your triggers are. And if you're not aware of your own unconscious patterns, triggers, and shenpas, as we just discussed, then you could be at risk, as I said, of becoming a hacked human, meaning an algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. And it would have the capacity, if so desired, to manipulate you. And if you think that's a little far-fetched, then consider this. I mean, next time you open Facebook or TikTok, I want you to notice something. I forget who Sam Harris was talking to, but this was on the Sam Harris podcast probably 2 or 3 years ago, so a while ago. And there'll be a split-second delay once you open the app. So if you're an older person, open Facebook. If you're younger, open TikTok. There'll be a split-second delay as the app loads. So the first video will load, and there'll be a split-second delay as the app loads. And then after a moment or two, a red notification will appear, and Facebook is notorious for even giving you notifications that don't even correspond to you. Like it will say like blah 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 posted, and you'll be like, okay. Like especially if you're not actively using Facebook, it floods you with notifications that mean nothing. And they do this because it simulates the same, and they do this on purpose because it simulates the same effect as if you win something in a slot machine, and like it lights up, a bell rings, it lets you know that you're a big winner, someone cares about your content, and you're getting dopamine from this little red notification bubble that lights up and like tells you that people care about you and care about what you have to say. And so it's kind of manipulating you to keep coming back to the app to get that little hit of dopamine. So if social media companies are already doing this, if they're already manipulating us to keep us on their apps, because that's what they're trying to do, it's the attention economy, what do you think the likelihood that AI companies will not do the same? So to wrap up with some practical advice, how can you prepare for the age of artificial intelligence? As we talked about, follow your bliss, follow your interests, follow what you're intrinsically motivated to do and interested in. And who knows what the status game will look like in a few years? Who knows what careers will still be considered prestigious in the coming years? So do not follow prestige, do not follow status, do not follow a destiny that someone is trying to force on you or is telling you that is, the way forward. If someone's telling you this is the only way to make money, this is the only thing that, women, men are interested in, whatever, don't listen to it, because nobody knows. Everyone's just making this shit up as they go along. All we know for certain right now is it's going to take a long time for AI to get good at creative, abstract, critical thinking skills that we as humans do on a daily basis, as well as the kinetic work that we do, such as engineering, building, tradesmen. It'll take a long time to replace any sort of work that's based on socialization or nurturing or human-to-human contact. So any sort of sales job, nursing or psychiatry, anything like that are going to be areas that still require human touch for quite a long time. So read what you're interested in and then become interested in reading. as we talked about. It could be anything. Just pick up something and read, or listen. Like, I'm someone who listens to things. Pick up something and listen. Whatever you're interested in, listen to it. Learn about history, philosophy, religion, and literature. I mean, I can help there, but as the major ways of recorded tradition and epistemological knowledge are recorded in history, philosophy, religion, and literature, you should at least have a broad idea so that you're aware when AI has made a mistake in like output. Because right now, AI will return to a blatantly incorrect answer with complete confidence. And it's only until you say, no, that's incorrect, that the AI will say, you're right, I'm incorrect. So like, it's almost like a test. Like, it's like it's like choose the wrong answer, because you'll ask it a question and it'll return to you something blatantly incorrect. And like, the only time I really recognize this is when you're like, oh, I'm thinking about this one thing that I kind of remember. Can you tell me like what actually the quote is? And it'll return you something and you're like, no, that's not it at all. And it's like, you're right, that's not it at all. Because at this point in time, it's a probability machine. It's trying to return to an answer that, based on statistics, is probably what the correct answer is. So it still will take a little bit to get to a zero error rate, as we talked about. But by the same token, at the rate that AI is iterating at a month-to-month basis, I don't think it will take that long to get there. On that note, learn about physics and the nature of reality. Kind of talked about this last week in my, the first spoke of the Eightfold Path in Buddhism is to become aware of the nature of reality. And especially in this age of artificial intelligence, it will be nothing but a benefit to you. Cultivate a meditation practice. We'll hammer this home as many times as I want. Just in an attempt to get in touch with the sublime, but also so you can learn more about yourself and your Shenpas and avoid becoming a hacked human in the coming years, because it's going to be a risk that an algorithm will be able to manipulate you in ways that you don't want it to do. As I said to my dad the other day, if you're not using social media is using you. So I don't mean that everyone has to use social media, but what I mean is that if you are on social media and you're not actively using it in a way that benefits you, then social media is exploiting you. Like, you are the product. And so AI is here to stay. There's no point in trying to put Pandora back in the box. Even if we were to regulate it or ban it in this country, like every other country, especially China, would be trying to use it to leverage itself to a competitive advantage. So there's no putting it back in the box. It's going to be as disruptive as the internet was, more disruptive than mobile was. But by you can set yourself up for success by cultivating your own creativity, curiosity, and critical thinking. You can not only survive in this new world, but thrive. As Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest among us, nor the strongest, but the ones who are most adaptable to change, who are the ones who thrive. So on that note, light love, my friends, and go in peace to love and serve.